And we are live. It feels kind of like old times. It's been a minute since we've been in the studio and done a live stream. If you don't know me or if this is your first time here, my name is Lily McIntyre and I'm Wasabi's marketing coordinator. And I'm pumped to be joined here today by David Boland, who's Wasabi's VP of Cloud Strategy. So before we get into it, David, how are you? How does it feel to be back in the live stream studio?
I'm doing great, Lily. Good to see you again. It's been too long. We have to do these more often.
Yes. So today's live stream kind of marks a momentous occasion for Wasabi because we have released a new multi-user authentication feature that we are going to talk about. And if you have no idea what MUA is, don't fret. We'll be covering what it is, emerging threats that have kind of prompted this feature, the role of immutability, multi-factor authentication, and how that plays into the topic that we're covering today, and also a real-world application of why does multi-user authentication actually matter, and also practical steps that you and your company can take to make sure that your data is safe and secure. So on that note, I just want to jump right into it. So like I said before, David, for those who don't know, can you just give an overview of what multi-user authentication is?
Absolutely. Thank you, Lily. So multi-user authentication is the newest feature that Wasabi offers on our user console. Now, folks are familiar with multi-factor authentication, but most people have probably never heard of the term multi-user authentication because it's unique and it's only available in Wasabi Hot Cloud Storage on our console. Now, multi-user authentication allows you to protect your storage account from either malicious deletion from a bad actor or an accidental deletion by someone who means well but pushes the wrong buttons. So multi-user authentication prevents your account from being deleted either by accident or maliciously.
Which is, especially in today's day and age where ransomware is just all over the place, this is hugely important. I also wanted to say two things. First of all, I see Sarah Cook has commented, hi there. Hi, Sarah.
Hey, Sarah.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Hope things are nice in Austin.
Yeah, seriously. And before we get into kind of the meat of this conversation, if any of you guys watching have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comments of this live stream, and David and I will be happy to answer them on the spot. And also at the end of this, we will be providing just a couple of resources and places that you can go to learn more information about this feature and also Wasabi in general if you're curious. So moving right along, David, what are some emerging threats that make MUA such a hot feature right now and why we've kind of jumped on this trend?
Let's talk about why multi-user authentication is critically important for people who want to protect their networks and protect their data, right? Excellent. All right. So if you think about the phases that people go through when their data is being attacked, right? First, there's the penetration of the network. Bad actor gets access to the network through phishing attacks. Maybe someone clicks on the wrong email or leaves an access point open that they shouldn't, and a bad actor gets on the network and steals credentials and is able to crawl around on the corporate network to find important information. Right? That's the first action. That's the gross. The first is the penetration of the network. Second is stealing the credentials for critical account systems, right? So if you're a bad actor and you're on the network now, you have network access. What you want to do is find the credentials that allow you to get access to the critical systems. There's the backup system, critically important. Active Directory, your DNS, your storage administration console, we'll talk about in a moment, and other key systems, right? So you have the stealing of the credentials and keeping those credentials managed and out of the hands of bad guys is critically important. We'll talk about that in a moment. So you have penetration, stealing the credentials, and then you have attacks on those critical systems. The pieces that we see attacked most often are the backup administration console, right? So if you're using Veeam, Rubrik, Commvault, or you have any kind of backup software, one of the first places people want to go who are bad actors are to those backup devices so that they can prevent the back data from being backed up. Because if someone attacks your network and you have a backup copy offline someplace, they can just restore. So what they want to do is they want to attack the backups, right? Say they get access to the backup, and then they get access to the backup storage console, Wasabi storage console, right? And they can either encrypt or delete those backups. Then you got a problem, because now you can't restore. You have ransomware. So where the world has moved towards immutable backups, because if the bad actors are able to get to the backup console and they're able to get to the storage console, and they find that those the backups are immutable, well, they can't change them, they can't alter them, they can't delete them, they can't encrypt them, because they're immutable for a specific amount of time. It could be either on a per object basis or a bucket lock basis. So therefore, if somebody attacks your data, attacks your network, and all of a sudden they find that they can't delete those backups, they're out of luck. They can't be held for ransom. So what do? They can't delete that data, but they've learned that they can delete accounts. So even if you have immutable data in your account, and the bad actor gets to that account using the root account information, the access, they can delete the account. If the account goes away, then you can't back up. You can't restore from that backup data. So what Wasabi has done is we've brought to market multi-user authentication, which says if somebody gets access, if in the crazy event that someone's able to get your root account information, they get access to your storage console, and they try to delete that data so that you can't recover from it, well, people in your organization can be notified that someone wants to delete the account. And so using Wasabi multi-user authentication, if someone tries to delete the account, the specific people who you've identified as your security contacts need to approve that deletion.
Yes. I think at the end of the day, this is another crucial step in the line of defense, because people are getting smarter, ransomware is getting smarter, so our defense strategies need to keep up.
Yeah.
So in the context of multi-user authentication specifically, what's the significance of not using the same access credentials for backup systems that you were talking about before, like multiple people and other applications?
Right. So if you were trying to delete a storage account, you really need to have the root account information. You have to have administrative access. And that is that account information, that access gives you the ability to delete an account. Right? There you have the root account information, you have administrative access. So therefore, you don't want very many people having that information. It could be sitting in someone's email, it could be sitting on someone's file, it could be sitting in a folder on a drive someplace. And if a bad actor gets access to the network and they're scrolling through information looking for credentials, they can find it. So very, very few people should have the administrative access ability. They should not have the root account information. But people need to have access to the storage console, to the backup console. So what do? Well, you give them a sub-account access. So you maybe give somebody read-only access to certain parts of the console. You give somebody manage event notifications access. You have view audit log access, or modify billing information, right? So people who do need access to the console or to that kind of data have a sub access, and they're not able to access everything. So best practices when it comes to creating a safe storage and backup environment is to limit the amount of access you have to the console, and do not share that root account information with folks. Using identity and access management information for sub accounts, critically important.
Right. And in cybersecurity, they're not the only people who are employing this kind of strategy. For example, I started off in social media, and Wasabi, if you're watching this on LinkedIn, hello. For our LinkedIn, you can see that there are super admins, content admins, and I believe another level. So this is really just another step in the cybersecurity world, but you're seeing it all over the place. Yeah. Also, Mohammed just commented, hello. Hi, Mohammed. So you mentioned immutability a bit ago, and I'd really like to dive into that a little bit more. So what is the role of immutability in cybersecurity best practices? And before you start, cybersecurity/ransomware awareness month is until October. So stay tuned for our content about that. But even 365 days a year, this is something that you have to be concerned about. So take it away.
All right. So one of the tools you have to protect your data and protect your information is immutability. And there's a couple different ways to look at this. So as you back your data up, you have the option of making it immutable, which means it can't be encrypted, it can't be deleted, it can't be changed, it can't be altered in any way, so that if you are attacked and yet data sitting in a storage repository someplace, then it can be downloaded and you can recover from that as long as it's immutable. Um, the and that's great. And you can keep immutable for a specific amount of time. You say, I want to keep this data immutable for 10 days, 30 days, 90 days, 100 days, whatever you want to do. And once that immutability lock is released based on that time frame, then you can move, alter, and change it. That's fine. However, this is a point I made earlier, that the bad actors have realized that they can't change it, they can't delete it, they can't encrypt it. It's immutable. So what do? Delete the account. Right? And that's where multi-user authentication comes in to help. It prevents them from deleting the account that holds that immutable data. It is that extra step that you take in order to protect that account.
Brilliant. So I just want to say before we continue, Sarah, I see your question. We will get to it at the end. So thank you for being patient with us. So can you talk a bit more about why MUA is another essential part of this overall security puzzle? Like you mentioned that it was just another step in this line of defense. So can you apply MUA to, I guess, the big cybersecurity big picture?
Big picture. Let's talk about some of the things that you need to do to make sure that everything is safe. We've talked about, let's talk about enable multi-factor authentication. You have multi-factor authentication on your phone. I do too. Every time I go to log into these days Zoom, it asks me to put my multi-factor authentication code into the system. If we all have grown up now living with multi-factor authentication for everything, so you should have MFA enabled on your important consoles or on the important devices you have on your network. So if somebody does get access to your network and then they try to figure out how to get access to the backup console, well, multi-factor authentication, will let will prevent them unless they have your phone. Unless they have your phone, it will prevent them from getting access to your system. But maybe they do have access to your phone, or maybe they do have access to your email. Yeah, I know. Or however, they have access to your email, or however you choose to receive that multi-factor authentication. Multi-factor authentication is critically important. Not the only thing you can do, though. Secondly, you have to use immutability. Because if they do get access to your MFA and they get access to your system, and then they find that that data is immutable, then they're stuck, right? So immutability is critically important. The third thing, let's limit user permissions. We talked about earlier. Don't give people the root account information. Don't make people the administrator to the account. Let's make everybody give everybody a sub account and only give them permission to access certain parts of the console that they need to access to, whether it's billing or troubleshooting or stats or whatever they pull. They don't need to have all that information. So MFA, immutability, limit user access, do not share your root account information, regularly upgrade your passwords or change your passwords.
Yes.
And, I know it's a pain in the butt. I hate changing my passwords every 6 months or so, but it's something that we should all do. And you can have an administrator in your IT system who's responsible for making sure those passwords are changed and updated every 6 months. And they have password change access. They don't need to have root account information access. And lastly, enable multi-user authentication. So the 5 things: MFA, immutability, limit user permissions, change passwords, and use multi-user authentication on your console to prevent account deletion.
Definitely. Oh, I love the way you outlined that in 5 simple steps. I will also say that on my computer, I'll get the notification, your password has appeared in a data leak. Unfortunately, I've X'd out that notification one too many times, and hopefully I won't have to learn the hard way about the consequences of that. But I guess zooming out even more, can you tell us a bit more about some real world examples about how multi-user authentication can get applied in these cybersecurity situations?
Yeah. So, it right now, it is only a feature of Wasabi Cloud Storage. If you have another cloud storage provider, you're not going to have multi-user authentication. ultimately, we think that the other cloud storage providers are going to offer multi-user authentication for account deletion. Absolutely, it makes a lot of sense. So, if you are a Wasabi cloud storage user, or you plan to be one, enable it. It's part of the, you can find it in the security drop-down menu of our console, and you can set up multi-user authentication. You can use it to identify up to 3 people in your organization who have to agree to delete the account. Right? So maybe there is a bad actor from within the organization. Unfortunately, someone was let go, and they hold a grudge, and they're angry, and they have root account information, and they're just going to burn the bridge on the way out the door, right? And they might try to delete accounts. We've seen this happen before in previous worlds. You can do a Google search and find examples of people who have deleted accounts on their way out the door.
Yeah.
If somebody has root account information and they're angry and they want to start deleting their cloud storage accounts or cloud services accounts, they can't unless the 3 people who have been identified as security contacts all agree. And what would happen is somebody gets mad, they go to delete the account, and then all of a sudden an email notification goes to one IT member, it goes to the CIO, it goes to an IT manager, it goes to a network manager, someone else, and all of them have to agree, yes, let's delete this account. So a real life example would be, unfortunately, somebody on the inside who's like, I'm done here, and is torching the place and is deleting the accounts, and they can't unless the people who have been identified as the security contact all agree. Yep, it's a good thing to do. And there's your example.
Thank you. And for the sake of karma, just don't be that person, because what goes around comes around. You don't want to.
Yeah, don't get caught. I think that the examples I saw, had jail time associated with them. So, it's when keeping it real goes wrong.
Yeah, that's pretty tough.
Yeah.
But before we get to Sarah's question, which I think is a great one to cover, do you have any other practical steps that you want to mention that people or organizations can take to protect their data?
Those are the 5, I mentioned, and more. Those are the most critically important ones. If you need to go into some detail or you want some more information, feel free to reach out to your Wasabi contact for sure. Go to the webpage and, you go to our knowledge base article and learn more about it. But of course, these 5, everyone should have a checklist on their desk. Do I have multi-factor authentication? Am I limiting the permissions that people have? I'm changing the passwords, and I'm using immutability, and I'm enabling multi-user authentication for deletion. Though, if you can do those 5 things, you should sleep well at night knowing that your data is going to be more secure than most of it out there.
And just so you know, in case it wasn't already clear, you won't be able to use all 5 unless you use Wasabi, because only we have MUA.
That's right. Yeah, multi-user authentication, unique Wasabi solution, and like I said, I think that other companies will follow suit because it makes sense. But right now, it's a Wasabi unique feature.
Sweet. So Sarah, thank you again for your patience. I think this is a great question to have a little chat about. So she wants to know, given the distributed remote workforce trend, I mean, we're both in our homes doing this live stream, does that increase the need for multi-user authentication, and how does that affect risk?
That's a great question, Sarah. Hope things are well down south. I know you guys had a heat wave down in Texas this year. Absolutely. So given a distributed workforce, what you find is often on the IT teams who are responsible for providing the services to the workforce is that the user permissions are given out to more and more people on the IT team. It could be operations, it could be engineering people, IT teams for sure. They're giving out user permission to access the console and databases that hold all the vital information, right? And so the more user permissions you give out, the more access people have to the console. And that's why we said that you got to limit the permissions that you provide. Don't give out that root account information. Make sure that you use information, use the IAM portion of the permissions and only give permissions to the consoles parts that people need. If people's, again, only work in billing, give them billing. If they're doing troubleshooting, if they're doing user permissions,
and make it easier for them. Just only assign them what they need to do.
That's exactly right. View and audit logs. If someone only needs to view and audit the logs on the storage, don't give them access to billing and accounting information. Limit that. And so, yeah, Sarah, yes, more and more people are getting permissions from the IT managers in order to access and troubleshoot storage. And so therefore they need access to it. And so all we're saying is limit the amount of permissions you provide, narrow the scope of what people can see in there, and make sure that you use multi-user authentication so no one can accidentally delete that storage account.
And that makes total sense with the remote workforce trend that you alluded to in your question as well, because people aren't on site as much anymore. But please, if anyone else has any other questions, feel free to drop them in the comments. We'll be able to see them. But if you are interested in learning more about Wasabi and our new multi-user authentication feature, send us an email at sales@wasabi.com. And one of our awesome sales reps will get back to you with more information. But if there are no other questions, thank you to everyone who joined us today. David, thank you for being the best as always. And we'll see you next time, hopefully without as long of a gap till the next live stream.
All right. Thanks, Lily.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.